At first glance, these look like two separate machines, a tower and an all-in-one PC with a CRT. Back in the 90s, IBM experimented with a fascinating split system design that separated the media console from the main tower. It's one of the strangest designs IBM ever tried, and today we're going to find out how it actually works. We'll tear this machine down piece by piece, bring it back to working order, and then reassemble it from the ground up. Along the way we'll find out whether this forgotten IBM design was a clever innovation, or an idea that deserved to disappear. I bought this machine untested, and I have never turned it on. So we need to check everything. CRT display included. So the first weird thing here to come off is the stand. And the reason for it being so weird is, of course, so that the media console can fit underneath. Needless to say, these machines are incredibly rare. So I have never been inside one of these before. Holy crap, this one is dusty. Good thing we decided to have a look inside. Check this out. You can barely make out that this is a fuse because it's so much dust in here. But more importantly, there is barely any soot inside here. In fact, I can't really see any soot at all. And that of course means that the tube is not worn out. Aside from the usual VGA connector, this cable also has two audio jacks. And at the back it also has a connector for a subwoofer. On each side of the tube there is a speaker box. So maybe if we're lucky, this machine has decent sound. Oh, there's actually two more connectors on the side here. One for headphones and one for a microphone. And my usual disclaimer, of course. Please don't mess around inside CRT displays. They may be charged with thousands of volts. This one is probably not, because I've had it for years and never turned it on. But I always check anyways. It's a good habit, so you don't forget when it actually matters. Okay, with the speakers removed, we can see that this is an NEC tube. I don't have any experience with these, so couldn't tell you if it's any good. But I guess we'll find out when we turn the machine on. You can barely see the glue because it's so dusty. So I'm gonna have to cut the glue here with a knife. Actually, the glue was so dry, I was able to peel it off. And as usual in CRT displays, there are tons and tons of connectors and cables. But everything is disconnected now, so we can remove the screws for the PCB tray. Despite all the dust, this machine actually doesn't smell bad. I wish I could say that last week when we restored the Model 90. Damn, that thing was smelly, but it cleaned up well. Now it smells nice. Well, only a small amount of dust has found its way on the tube. So I'm actually going to leave it in and dry clean this part. Compressed air is probably enough here. But the PCB definitely needs a wash. When I bought the machine, I thought the subwoofer was added by the previous owner, because it has a Cambridge Soundworks badge on the front here. But looking at the back here, this is actually an IBM Model 200 subwoofer. So this is actually the original speaker. I can see some big nasty spiders inside here. So the speaker needs some cleaning. Oh crap. It requires some kind of special extra long screwdriver. Well, that sucks. Well, in that case I'm going to use the Hoover and suck those spiders out through the front here. And that is going to have to do. Okay, so next we have the media console, and unfortunately it's broken. So when I push it down, it gets stuck in something, and then it comes up again. And if I'm not mistaken, it's supposed to fold down and stay down. So we need to repair it. Underneath here we've got a couple of bolt head screws. So let's remove them. Okay, this actually took a while, but I think I figured it out. So there are one tab on each side at the back here that we need to push, and then this side panel comes off. Well, I am guessing here because I wasn't able to find any information about how to disassemble these machines online. But I think we should pull these hinges off and at the same time lift the cover. Yeah, that totally worked. But it was of course spring-loaded as expected. And here's our large spring. Next I released a tab from underneath, and that freed up this panel here with the power switch and some LEDs. And underneath the module we've got tons of screws here, holding down a large shield, covering up whatever's inside here. Okay, I see. I think we can remove the lid now. Yep. Okay, let's see what we've got here. But first, I'd like to thank my favorite sponsor, PCB. Aside from making excellent PCBs, as we have seen in many of my videos, they also do CNC machining, 3D printing and PCB assembly. Perfect for prototyping and vintage computer restorations like this one. If you need some help designing your next PCB, check out their new PCB design surveys. Get an instant quote now for your next project at PCBWay.com. Thank you PCBWay for supporting this channel. Okay, and inside here we have an IBM branded Hitachi 15X IDC ROM drive, regular diskette drive, and underneath here there's a large PCB with a big chip and a crystal and a bunch of logic and two PS2 connectors at the back. There's also a row of transistors here, or quite possibly voltage regulators, and power connectors to the diskette drive and CD-ROM drive. And that's all there is inside here. And that brings us to the equally dusty tower here. So these are known as IBM Stealth or Split System, but the proper name is IBM Aptiva 2162. Since the drives are in the console, there is nothing accessible on the outside here. It does however have a nifty carrying handle, which apparently reveals two of the screws to get inside. Well, at the back here it actually looks like a regular Aptiva, with two exceptions. So first of all we've got this connector here that's marked 12 volts and a speaker. So this must be power for the subwoofer. I don't think I have the original cable, but it should be quite easy to make one. And then we have this large connector down here. It looks like a SCSI connector, but it's not. This is for the console. And there are no more screws at the back here. Okay, so how the heck do we get inside? Well, maybe it only has those two screws on the front, underneath the carrying handle. Well, there are two tabs underneath here, but they are probably for the stand. Sure enough, here's our dusty stand. Some of my Aptivas have a latch here to release that cover, but not this one. So let's see if we can just pull this cover off. Yeah, sure enough. Actually, it's pulled out this way. On the inside of the case here, we can actually see some bezels for drives. So I guess we could pull these covers off and install more drives if needed. Okay, well, if I'm not mistaken, this chassis is identical to the PS1 2168. There's plenty of space to install drives here. And the hard drive is installed up here, just like on the PS1. And it's a 3 gig Western Digital Caviar with IBM part numbers dated in 1997. So this must be the original hard drive. Let's hope it still works. So let's get those cards out next. So first we have the custom card. This card has some extra power from the power supply, but also a custom cable that I think is going to the sound card. And then it's also connected with an ID cable to the motherboard. And a third custom cable going to the motherboard. Okay, this card has one Altera chip, bunch of logic, and a massive resistor. What the heck is that thing for? How odd. And then we have the usual modem here. And the final card is a very unusually looking sound card. And this cable, by the way, was connected to the modem. Okay, so this looks like a rather interesting card actually. So we'll take a closer look at this card in a minute. Okay, and underneath those cards we have a riser board. Very similar to the PS1 we have restored on the channel. But there's a big difference. This card has two PCI slots, aside from the ISA slots here. And it has extra power connected. So we probably have a motherboard here, designed for an LPX desktop. The riser is installed on a motherboard, with the custom PCB and one large connector at each end. The subwoofer power connector here is connected to the motherboard. Well, this is a bit unusual. The motherboard is also getting some extra power, through a second power connector here, and what I think is an optional VRM. Well, it definitely shares a lot of components with a regular Aptiva, but there's also plenty of custom stuff in here. Power supply, however, is a regular MagnaTech. Unfortunately, it's put together with rivets, so we need to drill them out. And the same disclaimer applies here, of course. Some of the caps inside here could be charged with mains voltage, even with the cord unplugged. Well, everything looks okay inside here too. Well, except for the dust. No nasty refus. Nothing is bulging or leaking. So, off to the wash. Okay, time for that motherboard to come out. So, I see some Intel chips, one SMC chip, and an ATI chip. Well, only a small amount of dust has reached the motherboard. So I'll just quickly dry clean it and we'll take a closer look and see what we've got. Okay, it's actually the next day here. With just some compressed air, the display looks pretty much brand new inside. So not much cleaning needed. The PCB got a proper wash though, and it now looks like it just came out of the factory. I did a visual inspection and all the caps look good. Nothing is leaking or bulging. The few caps that have visible legs don't have corrosion on them. So this board should be okay to test. Okay, the display has been reassembled and it turned out to be in an excellent condition underneath all that grime, dust and cobweb. Okay, next we have the motherboard. And as I already mentioned, it's an IBM branded LPX board. It has Intel chipsets and 2 USB ports, so that's excellent. It has an ATI Rage 2 chip with some pin headers here for some optional additional VRAM. But that's not important because this machine has 2 PCI slots, so we can easily upgrade graphics. It came with 32 megs of IBM branded RAM and is upgradable to 64. It also came with an optional VRM, which is excellent, because that means we can use it with MMX CPUs. And that's actually what it came with, 200 MHz MMX and 256K of level 2 cache. So decent board. We are of course going to upgrade this machine, but that is going to be for a separate video. Jumper settings are available online for this board, so we can upgrade the CPU to something slightly faster. But let's go with the original CPU today. Okay, and then we have the sound card. And you may have noticed that it came with a wavetable. Now, I was not expecting this. This is a first for me in an IBM. It's based on the Crystal CS9233CQ. I have never tried one of these myself, but I checked online and apparently it's pretty decent. And a really nice upgrade for this card. I was planning to install a different sound card in this machine. But now I have changed my mind. I'm going to play around with this machine and see if this wavetable is any good. Okay, next we have the power supply. And it is of course nice and clean too now. Now I've had some trouble with one of these before. They tend to use a really crappy fan connector that came off in one of my power supplies and actually caused a short. And later that same power supply blew a cap. So let's hope this one is good. Now that may have just been bad luck, of course. Or perhaps they just are crappy. Since hard drives are failing so rapidly in the studio here, I decided to do a quick test of the hard drive. And unfortunately, it's just making a clicky noise. So this drive is dead too. I decided to install it in the machine anyways, but I'm going to leave it disconnected. Instead of that hard drive, I decided to add a compact flash card on the second ID channel. Now let's just hope that drive didn't have any hard to get drivers installed on it. Okay, and that completes the tower. And just like the display, underneath all that grime, dust and cobweb, it turned out to be a really nice machine in excellent condition. But we still have a large gaping hole underneath that display. And that brings us to the most interesting part of this machine. The drive console was pretty clean inside, so I just washed the case and dry cleaned the rest. Okay, so something isn't quite right with this contraption, since it wouldn't close proper. Let's see if we can figure this out. Okay, so without the drive bay, it goes all the way down. And apparently it has dampers. It also makes a clicky noise when pushed down all the way. And the clicky noise is coming from this contraption here. So this is the front of the console. And it has a spring-loaded pin here. Inside the lid there is this plastic notch. So I think the pin is pushed down here and locks into position underneath. And when we push on the lid, it somehow unlatches and opens up the lid. On each side of the lid there is a small damper. So that's why it's so smooth when it closes and opens. Okay, I checked and sure enough that pin lines up with this notch. So when the lid is pushed down, the pin is forced down and ends up underneath. And that locks the lid in place. And when it's pushed again, it's probably pushed down this way and releases. So that is our lock. One of the mounting posts was cracked, so I glued it and reinforced it with some baking soda. So let's wipe that excess off. And I checked for clearance, of course. And there's plenty of room for a big blob of glue. So I wonder if this was causing our problem. It's hard to tell, but I guess if this part here was flexing, maybe it could prevent the lid from closing proper. I guess we're about to find out. I decided to check that magic chip on the PCB that makes this possible. And it's an FTC37C932. Apparently it's an Ultra I/O controller, commonly found on motherboards. It controls the floppy disk controller, keyboard and mouse, serial and parallel, and IDE. So it's basically connected to the ISA bus. And in this case it's just controlling the diskette drive and the two PS2 ports at the back here. And the ID, of course, going to the CD-ROM drive. So pretty nifty contraption. I installed the drive cage back in the lid. The cracked mounting post here seems to hold up fine. So then we have this large spring inside, and it looks like it fits these two tiny holes. Then presumably compressed down like this. Let's install it and see if it fits. Okay, so the spring would only fit one way. So that's how I installed it. Now let's drop that lid down. Okay, so this is how it came. Now let's push it down and see what happens. No, this isn't quite right. It still gets stuck. Oh, actually I can see why. Check out the spring down here. So if I push the lid down, it compresses, but then it gets jammed underneath the lid. So here's our problem. Well, the only thing I can think of here is that it has been bent out of shape from age. This is hard to see on camera, but both sides are bent inwards. So I guess I'll straighten them up and see if that helps. Now check this out. Locked. Unlocked. Haha, that totally fixed it. Awesome. So that spring inside had just lost its shape. Probably from age. So that was actually a pretty easy fix. Okay, everything hooked up. Time for a test. Here goes. Okay, the fan spun up. I heard a relay in the display and we've got a splash screen. Invalid system disk. Well, that was expected, of course. Okay, so it seems to be working. Now let's insert a CD-ROM. Being a machine from 1997, it would very likely have had Windows 98 upgrade at some point. I had a look online, but unfortunately I couldn't find the restore disks. So if you have the restore CD for this machine, then please get in touch. Let's reboot. Boot from CD-ROM. Okay, awesome. It seems to be working. Well, I'm sure you have seen Windows 98 installation before, so I'll skip ahead here. Okay, and we've got Windows. The only missing driver was for the modem. I'm not going to use it anyways, so I'll just ignore it. The fans are a bit too noisy though, so they're gonna have to go, and I need to order some connectors for that subwoofer. So the list is getting pretty long for that upgrade video. So what do we make of this machine? Well, it's pretty awesome if you ask me. From a collector's standpoint, it's a no-brainer. It's an unusual and rare system. Of course you want one. And as for retro gaming, well, it's actually a pretty excellent machine, if you can find one. The wavetable is going to give you some decent sounds, and the MMX is perfect for retro gaming. It's fast enough to play tons of games, and it can be slowed down quite easily for your early games. The machine is a bit weird, but not so weird it's going to give you any trouble if you want to upgrade something. And as for back in 1997, well, I would have loved to have this machine for sure. So what do you guys think? Did this IBM make any sense back in 1997? Or is it just a good looking cool machine? I'm gonna let you guys decide. And that's all I had for you guys today. Before you leave, like, subscribe and leave a comment. And consider joining me on Patreon. And I'll see you guys again next week.